What if I told you there's a drug that can slash your LDL cholesterol by almost 70% and that people born with the same biology are essentially immune from heart disease? This isn't marketing hype, it's something nature has already tested for us. In 2006, prominent researchers Cohen and Hobbs identified a rare genetic mutation that didn't just lower LDL cholesterol, it absolutely slashed it. And the striking part wasn't these people's cholesterol numbers. It is what happened to their hearts. These individuals were dramatically protected from coronary heart disease. A certain subgroup in their study, African Americans, had an 88% reduction in their risk of coronary heart disease, and white Americans weren't far behind with almost half the risk. The gene itself is called PCSK9. But what exactly is PCSK9 and how does it have such a profound effect on cholesterol and heart disease? To start, as you already know, LDL is this ball of protein and fat that transports cholesterol throughout the bloodstream. When LDL levels can get too high, it can damage and cause plaque to build up in the blood vessel walls, which is what drives a lot of heart attack and stroke risk. And the evidence for this is clear. With LDL cholesterol, less is better. Meta-analysis of numerous large trials suggest that the incidence of cardiovascular events would essentially approach zero if LDL cholesterol was less than 60 in primary prevention and less than 30 in secondary prevention. Now, here's the thing. Your body has an inbuilt mechanism to prevent your LDL from getting too high. A clearance system of sorts. Your liver has specialized LDL receptors that physically pull the LDL particles out of your blood and then break them down. The more LDL receptors you have on your liver, the more efficiently your body clears cholesterol, which is exactly what you're going for. Sounds great, right? Well, as luck, you have another protein, PCSK9, that interferes with this process by promoting the breakdown of LDL receptors, acting as a natural braking system of sorts that prevents excessive LDL clearance. When PCSK9 activity is high, fewer LDL receptors remain on your liver cells, so your LDL cholesterol accumulates in the bloodstream and your risk of heart disease goes up. Some lucky people are born with faulty PCSK9 genes, meaning their LDL receptors are not broken down. Their receptors accumulate, LDL cholesterol stays low for life, and therefore their risk of heart disease is dramatically reduced. The natural extension of this discovery was obvious. If lifelong suppression of PCSK9 could lead to persistently low cholesterol and dramatic protection from coronary heart disease, could we perhaps artificially mimic that biology with a drug? Drug companies set out to do exactly this by artificially inhibiting PCSK9, preventing it from breaking down LDL cholesterol. The first proof of this came in 2012, when early clinical studies showed that AMG 145, a monoclonal antibody targeting PCSK9, produced an unprecedented reduction in LDL cholesterol. A single dose reduced LDL by up to 64% compared with placebo, and with repeat dosing, LDL reduction reached as high as 81%. These effects were far beyond which has been seen with existing lipid-lowering therapies, and confirmed that blocking PCSK9 could reliably reproduce the protective genetic phenotype seen in people born with this loss of function mutations. So at this point, our question changes. It isn't whether PCSK9 inhibitors could reliably lower LDL cholesterol. That part's already settled. Now, it was whether this has clinical implications. Did people started on this medication have fewer heart attacks, strokes, and even deaths? Our first definitive answer came in 2017, in a large randomized trial of more than 27,000 patients with established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Adding a PCSK9 inhibitor to your standard statin therapy lowered LDL cholesterol from an average of 92 all the way down to 30. However, the risk of the primary endpoint, which is the combination of heart attack, stroke, angina, and revascularization, was around 0.85. In other words, they were 15% less likely than the group without the drug to have any of the above events. To the average person, this could seem quite surprising. How can a drug that slashes your LDL cholesterol down from 92 to 30 translate to then what seems like a modest relative risk reduction of 15%? Is the medication even worth it then? The answer comes down to time. In this trial, the median follow-up was 2.2 years, but atherosclerotic plaque doesn't develop over days, months, or even a few years. It accumulates slowly over decades. Cardiovascular disease is essentially a long-term exposure problem. That's why the people who I mentioned at the start of the video with the loss of function mutations have a dramatically lower risk of heart disease. They've essentially had low cholesterol for their entire life. Short-term drug trials can only capture a fraction of that benefit, even when the LDL reduction itself is profound. And that's why this new paper published in NEJM just last month is making headways. In this study, they used the exact same drug, evolocumab, but excluded patients who had a previous heart attack or stroke, making it a primary prevention study. However, they followed patients for a median of 4.6 years, more than double the duration of follow-up of the earlier trial. With a similar outcome of heart attacks, strokes, and so on, they had a hazard ratio of 0.75, which means around a 25% risk reduction in these endpoints compared to placebo. When you line these studies up, a clear pattern emerges. The trial with the longer follow-up shows a larger separation in cardiovascular events, which is exactly what you'd expect. Heart disease is a chronic process driven by cumulative LDL exposure over decades, not something that changes overnight. As follow-up time increases, the benefit compounds and the distance between the treatment and placebo groups naturally widens. And the drug does offer some benefits over our current gold standard for LDL cholesterol reduction, which is statins. First, they tend to produce larger reductions in LDL cholesterol and ApoB, which may matter for people who can't get their LDL reduced despite diet, exercise, and conventional statin therapy. Secondly, PCSK9 expression is concentrated largely in the liver, with minimal expression for skeletal muscle. That provides a plausible biological explanation for why muscle-related side effects, a common side effect of statin, are not really noticed with PCSK9 inhibitors. Third, while PCSK9 is also expressed in the brain, the monoclonal antibodies used to inhibit it are large molecules that do not cross the blood-brain barrier, which may limit neurological side effects. So what does this mean for you as the viewer? Should everyone jump on the bandwagon and start using it? Whilst the results are genuinely positive, they apply to very specific patient groups. The earliest benefits were shown in patients with established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And although the newer study excluded patients without a prior heart attack or stroke, making it technically a primary prevention trial, that does not mean the results are generalizable to the average healthy person. The key reason is risk profile. This was not a trial in low-risk individuals. In fact, the trial registration makes it explicit that it targeted high-risk patients. To qualify, participants had to have established coronary artery disease, other vascular disease, or high-risk diabetes. At baseline, 87% were already on statins, 59% had diabetes, 27% were smokers, 87% had hypertension, and the median BMI was 30. In that context, it's reasonable to question whether this truly represents a primary prevention trial at all, given so many participants already had evidence of underlying cardiovascular disease. So, whilst the drug clearly works, the context in which it works is being oversold. The second consideration is funding. The trial was sponsored by Amgen, which represents a clear conflict of interest. That being said, this was a well-designed study, international, double-blind, randomized, and placebo-controlled. Financial conflicts don't invalidate results, they just warrant a bit of healthy skepticism. And finally, there's cost. PCSK9 inhibitors are expensive and injectable, which has real implications for accessibility and long-term use, especially in people who are otherwise healthy and already at low cardiovascular risk. That being said, an oral pill just came out, enlicitide, which in a recent study is already showing safety and efficacy. Ultimately, I think PCSK9 inhibitors are an excellent second-line therapy in the right patients. But the core message of this channel doesn't change. Diet and exercise come first. If lifestyle measures aren't enough, then it makes sense to consider simple, effective, and perhaps more affordable options such as statins. And only if these approaches fail to achieve adequate risk reduction / you have side effects does this new medication become a conversation worth having with your regular healthcare provider. If you want to understand which dietary strategies reduce LDL cholesterol and what the evidence really says about saturated fat, I've broken that down clearly in this video. The link is here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.